Let's begin by telling you that a fire incident has today engulfed parts of the Dangote Refinery in Lagos. According to reports, the fire broke out in the early hours of Wednesday at the effluent treatment plant of the refinery. There's been no confirmation yet as to how the fire started, but videos showed smoke billowing out of the section of the refinery affected by the fire. Now, the fire has since been put out, and a statement from the company's spokesperson, Anthony Chiejena, downplayed the severity of the fire incident. In the statement, he said there is no cause for alarm as the refinery is operating and there is no recorded injury or body harm to any staff on duty. It is curious that the incident is coming just 3 days after the company. All right, so now, right now we have to discuss this, I'm being joined by investigative journalist David Hundeyin. Hello, David. Thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so now the fire incident, is coming less than a year after its opening. And as history would have it, so many Nigerians are worried at the fact that, the refineries, that's the Nigerian refineries, actually tend to go up in flames, as history would have it. What is your take on this?
So, first of all, I have to point out that, at least according to the company, the refinery itself hasn't been affected. So the company claims in the statement that it's the effluent treatment plant that was affected, which is a roundabout way of saying it's the sewage treatment facilities, the wastewater treatment facility that has been affected by the fire. No further details have been given, so it's kind of difficult to establish exactly how a wastewater treatment facility can go up in flames to that extent, especially when eyewitnesses made mention of there being sounds of explosions. So, but we have to assume that the company is telling the truth. Now, if the company is not telling the truth and there is something else at play here, i.e. sabotage, then definitely that is something to be worried about, because for the avoidance of doubts, it definitely is in some people's interests for the refinery to not work if indeed it had the capacity to work, because historically it's been the case that as far as the economic model of Nigeria and Africa is concerned, some people prefer very much for Nigeria and Africa to export raw materials with as little beneficiation as possible, if possible, no beneficiation locally whatsoever. So the business model of Nigeria historically has been to export raw materials, so export crude oil, export gas, export solid minerals, export agricultural products, and that's it, with as little local beneficiation as possible, at least as far as the global market is concerned. So with that context in mind, it definitely does raise some questions that is there some sort of foul play involved here, especially as Dangote himself has come out recently to make accusations that the international oil companies active in Nigeria are actively seeking to sabotage the refinery by ensuring that it's not able to source its feedstock locally, and it has to import crude oil from as far afield as the US, and support from the government was being sought to compel.
Yes. Talking about that, David. Now, they did say that the U.S. has actually refused to insure the company, and also that there are rumors that it might be as a result of, the Indian technology being used. That might be the reason why it is struggling.
So, I mean, there have been rumors that there was an issue with the plant's insurance policy, that apparently Lloyd's of London was approached and they declined to insure it. Again, these are just sort of back channel things that one hears, and these are sort of unverified pieces of information. So that has to be emphasized, that none of this is like documented facts, at least not in the public domain. But there are whispers about things like this, that the fact that the plant was built almost entirely using Indian technology, using Indian expertise and Indian labor, has had some sort of an impact on the difficulty in sourcing adequate insurance. to keep the plant running. And if that were the case, that the plant is not insured, or the insurance policy were not to cover this sort of damage due to, whatever reason, then we potentially could be looking at a situation where, without making accusations, just putting the different pieces of the picture together, you have a situation where something that is supposed to be a transformational piece of economic infrastructure in Nigeria, because on its own, this refinery is supposed to be able to satisfy Nigeria's entire local energy demand. And you then have something that basically has the capacity to cripple this thing, or at least postpone its takeoff date, because to date, even though apparently it's producing jet fuel and diesel for the export market, the main thing, which I guess we've all looked forward to for more than a decade since this refinery project was first announced, is the production of PMS, petrol, for the Nigerian market. That still hasn't happened. Bear in mind, this site was commissioned, I think, on May 26th, a few days before President Buhari left office. This is well over a year now, and we're still yet to see any sign of any petrol. I have obviously been a public critic of this in the past, because I have publicly stated on more than one occasion that this plant was commissioned when it was not ready and is nowhere close to being ready. But, putting that aside, it's also the case that it definitely is in my interest as a Nigerian, it's in our interest as Nigerians for the plant to work, because the more Nigeria is able to export things that have had some beneficiation involved and doesn't need to import finished products as much, the better Nigeria will become economically. So questions do need to be asked, and the company obviously is being very secretive about this. The statement that was released really doesn't seem...
I was actually going to, go back to that, the statement that the company actually released, and the spokesperson, you're trying to downplay the whole thing. In your opinion, as, an investigative journalist, do you think it is a non-issue? Should we be worried?
No, I absolutely do not think it's a non-issue. I think, first of all, that there are discrepancies in the story that has been told by eyewitnesses and the story that is told in the statement released by the company, because the company says it's a minor fire in the wastewater treatment facility. Basically, it's a paper box fire in the toilet, essentially. But the eyewitnesses said that they heard explosions on the site, and clearly the evidence of the eyes tells you that this is not a minor fire at all. There's nothing minor about that fire. So what exactly? And this is a refinery site. So, if you're telling me that a fire is happening at a refinery site, but it had nothing to do with the flammable substances that are on site at the refinery, and it's the wastewater plant that went up, and you're offering no further detail, you're being very evasive, very tersely worded statements, and then the week before this happened, literally the week before this happened, your managing director, I think his name is Devakumar Edwin, has been on a media tour, has been doing the press circuit, directly accusing international oil companies of trying to sabotage this refinery. Well, it may be a case of putting 2 and 2 together and getting 22, right? It might be that the company is telling the truth, but the onus is actually on the company at this point to come out and offer more information, because the fact is that the Nigerian people, via the NNPC and the government, have invested a lot into this project. So the company cannot then act as if, well, this is a private business, you're not entitled to any information about this. Meanwhile, so much public money and public expectation has gone into the building of this thing. If you're happy to take public money and make this project almost a political thing when it was being developed, then you have to be willing to accept scrutiny now. So we need more information.
Okay, David, just before we let you go, now speaking on the amount of money that has actually gone into this particular project, it still raises a question, the fact that, it occurred just 3 days after the project, has gulped in this much amount of money. Now, looking at the future of this refinery, what do you see?
Well, I'll start with what I hope to see. What I hope to see is that it somehow, against all the odds, starts operating and starts to satisfy the local petrol demand of Nigeria, because that is one of the main sources of sort of the forex leakage that Nigeria has to deal with. Nigeria is very much an import-oriented economy, not because Nigeria does not have the capacity to produce and export, but because, again, as I said, historically, it's been the case that those in charge of the global markets have the belief that the place of Africa is to export raw materials with no beneficiation whatsoever. So what I hope to see is that this refinery and the associated petrochemical projects affiliated to it make it such that Nigeria is able to actually exploit its own vast, cheap energy reserves and actually start to industrialize. That's what I hope to see. But what is more likely to happen in the short term, I think the company is going to keep obfuscating, and I think they're going to keep on releasing statements every 3 days, every 5 minutes, telling people we're going to start doing this next week, next month, and it just keeps getting bumped up next month and a month after that and a month after that. Because if you recall, in May 2023, we were told categorically that before the end of June 2023, there will be locally refined petrol in Nigeria's market. We're nearing the end of June 2024. That absolutely has not happened. No explanation has been volunteered. Just more arbitrarily set deadlines, and then this, which I suspect could possibly be used as an excuse to postpone that self-imposed deadline again. So